how do you analyse that game? Because it's not like a normal game where it's tight and close and you're thinking this tactic worked, that tactic worked, this player worked. It was just one side overwhelming another. I mean, Meath have some good players. Dublin have 25 plus brilliant players. You know, I've done the Dublin North versus Dublin South, and the depth is unbelievable. That's not their fault. Their depth is unbelievable, and they're making the most of what they have. Meath are carrying players. I think if Dublin weren't involved, Meath would be a relatively decent team in the overall scheme of things, but it's gone to the stage that Dublin's quality is just embarrassing other teams. And you know, you sort of recalibrate expectations when you're going into games with Dublin now, especially in Leinster. You think, geez, if the opposition can keep it into them for a half an hour, we'll be doing well. So while that game was going on, you know, it was 5-1 at half time. It could have been anything at half time, you know, missed penalty for Dublin, some other chances as well. It could have been anything. So at half time, when there was just 4 points in it, you were quite relieved. But at the same time, I was having a conversation with the Dub beside me and just wondering how many points are Meath going to end up with at the end of this game. It ended up being 4, but it could have been even fewer. Now you'd hope it would be more than 4, but I don't know. So it's just so hard to analyse it and contrast it then with Roscommon won the Connacht final a week beforehand, and you think of the fans coming on the field and the scenes and all that. It was exceptional. I was at Dublin Galway in the hurling the night before, which was basically the last round robin game, but effectively knockout. Brilliant crowd all over the field, just great scenes. Whereas this, you know, it was 2/3 empty Croke Park, maybe even less there at the stage when Stephen Cluxton was doing his speech. I looked for joy on the field, players just walking around holding hands. Now, I've no doubt that the Dublin players enjoy this, enjoy the experiences, enjoy the matches. They'll go out and have great fun. So they're no different to anyone else. They're still going to enjoy it. But there's some difference between winning a tight game and, you know, just the emotions involved then when you win a really tight, brilliant game that people are going to talk about forevermore. And that's just not happening in Leinster. And being honest, it's a bit of an embarrassment to the GA at this stage. And it's not it's not Jim Gavin's fault, it's not Dublin's fault. Just the odds are skewed so far in Dublin's favour in terms of money, infrastructure, and people like RT did quite a good discussion, I have to say, a good piece before the match about both sides of whether the money was everything. And Kieran Whelan spoke about, you know, the plan came in 2002, the money started going in 2005, and you know, he kind of pointed out the amount of players that were over 30 that were involved, and the guys who've been there since, you know, before the money could have had the true impact on the players coming through the development squads, which is fair enough. But what I would have liked to have seen them touch on, and him touch on a bit more, maybe the other pundits, was the fact that even if those players came through after the money came in after them, it keeps the panel together. It allows you to give the best preparation involved for those players for the next 10, 15 years. If you're in a successful team, players don't want to retire early. It's very few that will. And, you know, any of the Dublin players that have retired in the last year or two, there's a fair chance in most cases it wasn't their choice. So you're going to stay involved. So if you have the right money, the right facilities, and it feels like an amazingly professional setup, you're going to want to remain involved. Contrast then that with any of the developing counties. And you think of the amount of players that walk away in droves because they're like, what is the point? And of the mid and lower level teams out there, I know anecdotally of many, and I think it would be unfair to single out too many, but I will pick an example of one that walked away, which is Meath former goalkeeper Paddy O'Rourke. And he wrote about it in the past. Well, I ghost wrote the article for him. He got a huge kickback over it, where he essentially said, why would you train for 10 months a year for this? And Andrew Colgan was in the goal today. Tough job for him. But I would imagine Paddy doesn't regret not being there because, I mean, that's what you're up against. It's 117 to 4 points. It was just a bit of a humiliation. And like Meath as a county, obviously very proud. Every county is proud of its history. And that's what's happening now because, unfortunately, the odds are just skewed so far against them. I saw a tweet from On The Bank, who said simple things that the top teams take for granted. Make partnerships with food companies, stats tech companies like Huddle, Stat Sports, etc. for reviewing games. Elite teams don't worry about these things, whereas weaker counties are either bankrupting themselves to have these or they just don't have them. And it's very, very true. And if you're trying to compete with the top team, you're overstretching yourself. I suppose it's like any business in life that overstretches itself. You're going to lead yourself to a point where things can go very wrong for you. And again, it's not the fault of the Dublin players at all. And I really don't like the idea of being told simply split Dublin in two, because like Dublin have their identity. Every county has their own identity. So the idea of just telling someone, right, you have to forget about that identity you've had for the last 130 odd years of the GAA's existence. You're now going to be Dublin South, Dublin North, or whatever it may be. But we're at a stage where something has to give now, and whether that's the idea of splitting up Dublin, which would be kind of the last thing that I think, I definitely don't like the sound of it, the feel of it, but something has to change. So whether it's that, or whether the GAA focus on bringing up other counties, then something really has to give, and straight away. And it's not like hurling, whereby it's elite level in the sense that there are now 10 counties competing at the Liam McCarthy level, 5-5 in Munster and Leinster, and then the Joe McDonagh finalists get into the competition. It's at the stage now where it's not 10 up at the top tier and the rest down below. It's Dublin, and it's maybe the odd challenge from your Mayo or your possibly Tyrone, if you count that All-Ireland final challenge. I don't necessarily count it. It's just Dublin and the rest. So it is at that point where it feels like no one is going to really be competing with them. So something big has to change there. For Meath, they did okay, and I see some people tweeting that they're abysmal. I don't think they're abysmal. I think some of their players are pretty decent, but just the grand scheme of things, they've got players of different shapes and sizes, different levels of athleticism, whereas all the Dublin players, they're in supreme condition. They have a huge amount of guys that are 6'2", 3, 4, fast, and just Mayo can't keep into that. They just don't have that level of player. Meath were 5-1 at half time, as I said, quite fortunate to some degree, because Dublin missed the penalty. Can you imagine if Meath had a free taker, or if their shooting wasn't so poor, then maybe they would have been even closer again. But ifs and nuts or candies and buts. But crippling levels of pity there at this stage. The dub I was sitting beside, he was actually screaming for a Meath penalty at one stage when they got a free in between the 14 and the 21. I mean, a Dublin fan is screaming for Meath to get a penalty because there is no challenge here at all, and just something to make it interesting. And just even some of the Dublin fans getting annoyed at how poor Meath were at shooting. I mean, that really says it all. And it was tweeted at me, the shooting stats. From play, Dublin hit 14 of 18, which is 77%, and Dublin would definitely be doing score and efficiency stats, so that's huge. Whereas 3 from 16 from Meath, which is absolutely terrible. So it's very hard to know what to say for Meath, really, because how do you rebound very quickly? They'll be coming up against a round 4 qualifiers soon, and if they get to the Super 8s, they'll be against Kerry, Donegal, and maybe Galway or a qualifier as well. So depending on who comes through, if they can get a couple of more games under their belt against top opposition and get something out of the season now, because so many teams, they have a decent season, come up against Dublin, and it just feels like, what's the point anymore? So if they can get a couple of good performances in there, they won't have to face Dublin again, and maybe just take something out of the season. For Dublin, Roscommon and Cork, Cavan are the qualifiers that get through if they beat Cork or Cavan. So Dublin are going to waltz through. I mean, they're going to definitely waltz through that. I mean, maybe they'd end up with Mayo and Tyrone in their group as well, but even so, they're going to come through that. Donegal winning the Ulster title. That's Cavan, who are the aristocrats, have the most titles won since they last won a title. Donegal have won, since Donegal won their first title, Cavan have only won one. So that's a 10th title for Donegal, and 5 of the 5 times it's been lifted by Michael Murphy, which is incredible. Jamie Brennan, he's up there in the Footballer of the Year conversation. If somehow Donegal could go and win the All-Ireland, he can't be far off it. His pace is unbelievable, his finishing is very strong. I posted a video on Twitter earlier of some soccer style assist he did for the under-21s against Derry a couple of years ago. It's really worth watching. One thing that I really didn't like from the Ulster final was the amount of fisted points. Again, absolutely hate the fisted point. You're in an exciting situation and somebody just releases the excitement by fisting it over the bar. It was in the Dublin game as well. The spectacle is absolutely awful. Joe Ryan tweeted, "The fisted point and the thrown two-handed goal are a blight on a struggling game. outlaw both, and the number of goal attempts, and consequently the number of goals will increase. At the very least, it might inject some much needed excitement into the game. Yeah, I really don't like that goal that you see from Dublin time and again. Someone hand passes it over and it's just palmed into the net like that. It's just, I mean, it's Gaelic football. The ball should have to be kicked with your foot at least once. So yeah, and that was the day that was in it. Not the most exciting game for football, or day for football, it must be said.